had enough time, you think?
Stephen, let me start with a question. At the end of the process of going through getting a screenplay together and the filming, what is it that you yourself learned about Che?
Well, because the process of developing and making this film was so extended, we started talking about it when we were working on Traffic. Laura Bickford, who produced Traffic, and Benicio and I started talking, so that's 8 years ago. And what I found was that sometimes you say yes and you're not sure why you said yes, and that reason changes in your own mind over the course of making the film. And it really wasn't until the films were finished, around the time of Cannes, that I realized what they were really about to me, or what drew them to me, was this issue of engagement versus disengagement. That every day in our lives, on a personal level, on a community level, on a global level, we are making a decision about how engaged we want to be or how disengaged we want to be. Do we want to participate or do we want to observe? And I realized that what was compelling about Che to me was once he made the decision to engage, that he engaged fully, that he was able to sustain whatever you need to do that every day, especially when your life is at stake. And you have to remember, he's also an atheist. And so a lot of times when you have figures that can sustain this sort of level of engagement, they attribute it to a higher power, or there's some other element that they can call upon. He didn't have that, or at least he expressed it in terms of only being concerned with what people were doing to each other here. So that's where I ended up landing. But as I said, it sort of changes throughout, but that's ultimately, it was about engagement.
How important for you was the whatever historical record exists? The last part you give us, day 340, such and such a place. How much did you have really to go on?
Well, as any of you know who've read up on Che at all, you go to the bookstore, there's an entire wall of Che material. There's a lot to go through, and we try to go through all of it. We spoke to everyone who's still around and willing to talk, that fought with him and knew him. And research can be, well, I think J.G. Ballard once said that research is the refuge of the unimaginative. And there were times when I thought he was absolutely right, that we were just overwhelmed with information. And as John Lee Anderson, who was one of our consultants, said at the press conference in Cannes, he said, look, there's a million Che's. He means something different to everyone. But I was trying as much as I could to avoid scenes that I thought were too typical. Like, I didn't want to have the scene where somebody says, hey, why do they call you Che? Or, him in battle and his hat blows off and he runs over and picks up a beret. I didn't want to do that. So that helped too. And then we get you find these crazy little stories from people. One of our favorites, we found very late in one of the memoirs written by the Acevedo brother, who we see at the end of the film, driving the car to Havana, and Che stops him and says, turn around. We found that story very late in the process, and I thought, it's such a perfect Che scene, a perfect expression of who he was. So I was always on the lookout for scenes like that. Well, if this film makes $100 million, I'll make the third one. We talked about it. The story of Che in the Congo is absolutely fascinating. And we actually sort of sketched an idea for a very small film that would take place in the Congo and in Prague, where he went after fighting in the Congo to sort of lick his wounds and write a very self-critical book on what happened in the Congo. You know, the glib answer is we didn't have enough money to do that. And also, it's a fascinating chapter, but didn't really fall into the kind of bookend idea that we ended up with. When the film was first being developed, it was only about Bolivia. And it was a little more than halfway through the process of working on that we decided, you know, Bolivia doesn't really make a lot of sense unless you've seen Cuba, because you keep wondering, why doesn't he quit? I mean, it's going so badly. And you have to see what happened in Cuba to understand why he still thought they were going to pull this off. So it grew from one manageable film into one giant film, and then, of course, sometimes it's overseas, it's going to be split in half. So we just couldn't fit that in. But we read all that material, and in fact, there was a quote from one of the African rebels that fought with Che, Victor Drake, which was fantastic. He said, Che would rather face a bullet than reality. And it's a perfect description of him, I think.